Good afternoon, everyone. As Joel said, we've known each other a long time, so he knows I'm an Irish guy who can talk a lot and keep going. So he said, I've only got 15 minutes or so, 15 or 20. So I'll try to be brief. Yeah, I thought what I'd do is I wasn't going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Parker and who we are, but just at a macro level. I mean, Parker, as Joe points out, we're about a $14 billion company at this point, headquartered here in Cleveland. And we have 7 or 6 business groups the way we're set up. So we have a whole filtration organization, we have a motion systems organization, aerospace organization, et cetera. And then each one of those have a number of those manufacturing and individual, what we would call divisions, that have their own P&Ls and their own challenges and how they drive forward. And one of the challenges we had was when we went back to like 2010, I think we had 225 websites. And we used to have fun with folks like Joel who would come and try sell each of our divisions, wanting to design new websites and things like that, which, that was what was happening in 2010 and things like that. And we really needed to take a step back. We go to market as one brand. So we actually go to market as Parker, and then we have sub-product brands. So when you think about that, for potentially 100 different voices coming from our different divisions to one customer, but then under one brand, they're like, hey, we want more consistency. You layer on top then the digital world, where in the past we were very much like, we would talk about a person-to-person, belly-to-belly kind of selling. Individual divisions, where we live in a high-mix, low-volume kind of world. We make over 1 million standard products, and we make millions of configured products. But we don't sell millions of units of any one of those part numbers. So it becomes this sort of interesting. There's a couple of exceptions. Parker has an exception of everything. So we had to sort of take a step back and say, okay, how do we define this? What does the website mean for Parker? Historically, it was a catalog online. And we took a little bit of a different approach, actually almost 10 years ago now, back in sort of 2010, 2011, and said, we really need to look at this. And before customer journey mapping and customer experience was like cool, we were saying, this is really more about the buying process, right? So how do we bring people along the buying journey? So that's sort of, which was different for Parker, but related to us because we know how to sell, right? We're a selling-orientated company rather than a marketing-orientated company. We're an engineering and selling company. That's how we're structured. So what we did was we sort of went through and said, okay, the world has changed around us, whether we like it or not, right? Our customers' expectations have changed dramatically, and that's true, I think, for all of us. I mean, we're really a pure B2B play. We don't really sell to consumers at all. I mean, a lot of people don't know what Parker sells or what we do, but pretty much if it moves, there's probably a Parker product on it, right? We're one of the largest filtration manufacturers in the world and things like that. And our business is broken into very large. If I was to oversimplify it, I would say we sell to people who make things, and we sell to people who use things. And what I mean by that is we're selling to the guys who are designing planes and boats and trains and trucks and bulldozers. So they're designing and building them. And then the folks who use them need parts and spare parts when things break. So we're selling to that MRO market, right? So it's sort of that buy-use kind of fashion. But the big difference is our direct customers who we're selling to those people who build are typically where we have our relationships. We don't really have a relationship with the farmer in the field or the construction guy on the, on the construction site driving the bulldozer or the backhoe and things like that. Those relationships are typically with our distributors. So that creates an interesting online experience because our customers come at us from all sides, right? So if the backhoe, somehow the hose blows in the backhoe, they need a replacement hose, they go to Google and ask for a replacement hose. They don't come to Parker, they don't necessarily think like that. So we have to think about that in this sort of world where traditionally we sold things by the pallet load, right? We sold it to the OE who did it there. And then our distributors were relied on, and they're still a key part of our relationship. They are sort of our main way of going to the aftermarket. We'd rely on them to sort of pick up that whole market. The challenge for digital for them, though, was they've got to have the presence, and you're competing for mind share and all of that. And our distributors are, very competent distributors, but they're generally not billion-dollar distributors, right? They're smaller, $10 million, $50 million companies, and investments in online are difficult in itself, right? So as we look at the customer environment and saying, hey, people want 24/7 access to our information, right? We sell valves and hoses and things like that, so a lot of it's really about content. They want information about how do I install this? What do I do? What's the specs? Am I getting the right replacement? Do I have the right part number? Because they really don't care about our product. They care about keeping their piece of equipment running. So, you have to acknowledge some of that. So what's happening is they want 24 access, they want more increased frequency they want that real-time information, right? Used to be they'd have to go look up the catalog, call the distributor guy, say, hey, come in and tell me what you got. That's all gone away, right? And for us it was sort of interesting because for many industries that went away like 10 years ago. But for us it didn't. In the industrial space, we still had the benefit of people using paper catalogs and being not socially active online and things like that. And then that has dramatically changed for us in the last 5 years. So the need to personalization and the need to make it simple. So when you have, when we first looked at Parker, we looked at our product catalog online. In 2010, we had 45,000 product categories on our website. Parker only sells about 500 product categories. But we had 45,000 on our website. And why? Because each of the divisions came up with their catalog, right? And when we talk about our divisions, we back then, again, the structure in the company has evolved, but we may have had 15 divisions that make filters, make different types of filtration products. So they would come up with their own catalog structure, their own categorization structure, and not compare them to each other. And they were empowered to put it online. So hence our customers were like, we can't find anything here. So back to that, how do we make even our own information simple was sort of key for us, right? So I guess before I move on and I tell you how we frame this up and what we think about our strategy, for us the key was it wasn't actually technology that was the hard part for us. It was actually the business process change, because the technology is actually the easier piece. Because what technology we found was it was enabling us to do things that we always wanted to do. The example we would give at the office was online chat, right? So we think, hey, online chat's actually a very valuable tool. And we would say, listen, forever, if we had our way, we would take an applications engineer and embed him at our customer for free if we could afford it. Because we know then we're the trusted advisor and we could go do that. And for some of our very large customers, we do that, right? That we're part of their partnership and stuff like that. But now all of a sudden this technology comes along, which is online chat, and I could take an application engineer and make him available to or the team available almost 24/7 to almost be that advisor in a very cost-effective way. So again, our business strategy didn't change. We always wanted to do it, but the technology allowed us to enable things that we couldn't do before. So that's how we started to think about this whole thing. It wasn't so much, oh, what's the tech stack and what's this and what's that. It was more like, what are the business processes that we're trying to address? So we actually simplified it really. We're a manufacturing company, right? So buzzwords like, hey, what's your bounce rate and what's this and what's that? They're like, what are you talking about, Alan? Aren't you the webmaster guy? Do you even need to do anything? And even the buying process itself wasn't something, because again, marketing wasn't in our DNA, so we didn't think about it that way. So we actually talked about things in terms of value streams. So we're a manufacturing company, people understand what a value stream is. And we defined 4 value streams. We said, okay, attract is one of our value streams. How do we attract customers to Parker? Our biggest risk is people don't consider us when they go to Google, they don't find us. So we have a problem for us and our distributors, right? So we then said, okay, there's programs that we want to hit here with attract. There's programs we want to hit with find. Is how do they find the answer to what they're looking for? Our biggest challenge, again, as a business, was all of our product knowledge was in our heads. When you looked at one of our printed catalogs, it was a spec sheet. So it gave you the speeds and feeds of each of our products, and again, we were in that sort of world, but it didn't tell you the application it went on. It didn't explain to you the description of, hey, how this filter can help you optimize this, that, and the other thing. Our salesmen generally told that story. So now all of a sudden you have to take all that and put it online. So this whole concept of, how do they find the answers became key. Buy is sort of the e-commerce, hey, Alan, nobody's going to swipe credit cards and buy our stuff online, but this was more about how do they get order status, how do they do various things, and how do they move forward, and then how do we support them through the process. So we then layered on top of that strategy these 5 premises of our strategy, right? So we talk about, look, for us it's all about knowledge sharing. So how do we get our content and actually recreate our content in a way that customers can digest it? Huge, that's probably our biggest challenge as an organization, and I think for every organization. But for us, it was even the realization that this was a problem. Because from a sort of management standpoint, we thought, well, why don't we just take all the printed stuff and put it online? And one realization we had I'd say this was sort of 2014. This aha moment happened because people were like, why isn't all our content online? It was like, if we could magically take every printed piece of material and magically put it online in the right format, like not just PDFs online, we'd only have 30% of the content we needed. And that was a huge realization for us. Because it was like, crap, we actually don't tell the story of our product in our printed documents. We tell it verbally. So now we have to go write long descriptions and short descriptions and describe our products that we didn't have to do before, because it was all our distributors having a face-to-face conversation. So we found we had a lot of lack of information. So this whole concept of knowledge sharing, our partners are key to us, right? So we have 10,000 plus distributor rooftops around the world. Huge part of our aftermarket business. But we weren't going to go direct. We weren't going to do all that. We embraced the partner channel, and we wanted to wrap programs specifically around them. And I'll give you one or two examples of how we did that. Digital marketing, I mean, that's up there as a course. You say, well, that's basic, right? But for us, it wasn't a competence of Parker. And just the ability to communicate online and get it online, we needed to sort of recognize that. And then it was sort of account management, because again, the challenge for us is our customers are very large. We have personal relationships with lots of them, so why do they need the web? But it was about how do we support, and it became very much a support and customer experience role for our large accounts, not a demand generation. And that's a big shift for Parker, because what we were fighting against was the thought of, well, look, we know aerospace, right? There's only so many aerospace manufacturers in the world, right? We sort of know them all, and they all know us. And so you say, well, what's your demand generation there? Well, it's really less about demand generation with them. It's more about communications and relationships and giving them the content faster, quicker, at their fingertips kind of thing. So you now think about this philosophy of, it's not replacing the salesman, it's augmenting the salesman to make his transaction life a lot easier and giving the design engineers the information they want. So this whole idea of account management had a slightly different, we were less about sort of the whole ABM kind of philosophy, right? Hey, how do we get more leads out of the account? And for us, the first step was building, and it is still, I'm making this sound like it's the past tense, we're right in the middle of it right now, but it's really about how do we strengthen that relationship through knowledge sharing? Because we feel then the leads will come, and rather than us, it's easy for us to send emails out and do social campaigns and all that, but if we don't have any substance behind it, like if we're not actually telling them a story, like a filter and a valve and a hose and a fitting is not very glamorous. It's not really an exciting thing. You tend to need them when you need them. So to tell the story about how we're being more productive and efficient became key. And then obviously the emergence of digital products and services, for us, it's a big deal, right? It's not just things like artificial intelligence, but it's also the Internet of Things, and how do you sensorize your products, and how do you say, hey, that filter needs to be replaced? The first Internet of Things is that little LED on your fridge, right? It's not very sophisticated. It's just set on a timer, by the way. So it's just like every 6 months, it's just going to go off, or every 3 months, depending on how your fridge is set. It actually isn't gauging the life of your filter at all. It's just telling you that, hey, you need to replace it. So this became sort of a foundation strategy for us, and we had to think about it that way. And then the key was you got to understand the customers, right? Again, I'm stating a lot of the obvious here, but for us, again, it was, we sort of underestimated that we already knew why our customers were coming. And for us, online, digitally, that kind of thing, it was a belief that they weren't going to buy online. But when we look at our two main audiences, we have lots of personas, but the two big ones are sort of design engineers and maintenance, repair, and operations, or maintenance, repair, and overhaul, depending on which industry you're in, are the two folks that are, again, people who make things, people who use things, is effectively what's happening. But we were finding things like, hey, the MRO guy, we're thinking, oh, he just wants to buy the part quickly. They were more interested in training content online on how to install something than they were in how to buy it. Like just understanding those insights helped us position ourselves better to help our distributor channel. Because as the OE, our job was to provide the content so that our distributors could then, drive the transactions. And I'll give you another example of that in a second. But again, you can't speak to this too much, the whole customer journey. But for us, it wasn't about the buzzwords. It was more about who are we selling to, what do they want? And we literally broke it out as simply as this, but it gave us sort of the proportions of what kind of content. Product selection became our number one thing. Part of that's the nature of our business, because we don't sell just one thing, but it's how do I find the right replacement part, or how do I find the right part to design into my system? Digitally helps us. We've always wanted to do that, right? So if you think about what's the technology, as I said earlier, it's not about the technology, it's about the actual business goals. We always did that with personnel. People would tell the story, people would explain it. It's just hard to scale people. Digital comes along and wow, can we tell those stories now digitally? That's sort of a mindset shift for us that we had to undertake, and we're still in the process of doing it. E-commerce is an interesting one for Parker, right? So we have the ability today to take orders online and fulfill through our channel or fulfill direct. So we actually created a private marketplace kind of structure in Parker. But our goal was never to sell. It was actually to drive leads. And it was to connect our channel and show that our channel we're integrating to them. So we took a basic commerce kind of capability and we route those orders directly through our distributors. And we tell our customers that they're getting it. But what was more powerful was actually things like quote carts. So we actually bought an e-commerce platform, turned it on, but didn't actually turn on the add to cart. We actually turned it into a request a quote cart. And we would send it to a lead for the customer. So the customer could come online, browse like they're adding something to a shopping cart, because we knew our customers weren't going to take a credit card order, but they would build up a quote request in a sort of a consumer kind of way, and then we could send that quote request directly on to one of our distributors or directly to one of our divisions. But that sort of thinking of, well, they really want quotes, they're more interested in quotes and information than they are into instant transaction. So that's the kind of thing we did. So we actually have more value in the sort of quote side and then connecting our distributors and our customers with the portal environment than we have to the, hey, what's your ROI on how many sales you're doing? Because we positioned this more as a lead generator and a relationship builder with our channel than we did a commerce engine. Part of that, again, is back to your business, right? Our business is, we're not in the business of selling over-the-counter components. But we are in the business of finding as many leads as we can for our distributors. So then we did the traditional stuff, right? So we built, for us it was a big deal about even building a whole story about which industries we serve and things like that. And at Parker it's really difficult. Because at first we viewed ourselves as in like 2,000 different industries. And depending on how you define industries, we are, because we're in anything that moves. So we sort of said, hey, what's our primary markets that we're going after? How do we tell our stories? And then we build integrated campaigns for us. But again, we don't see, believe it or not, at Parker, this is not a huge, it's a necessity for us. It's understanding how do you communicate and build. And we have an integrated social program. We have 168 social presences around the world because of all the different languages and all the different platforms and stuff. But we focus on trying to have a consistent integrated message as we work through it. So for us, the shift was to move away from the product conversation more into the applications and value-added conversation. Again, keeps coming back to content, right? It was being able to tell that content story became key. So again, it was back to what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to help customers select products. It sounds really simple, but we have to take a step back and say, how do we take an applications engineer and put him in a box? Or put her in a box, because that's what we were trying to do, right? It's that thought process of how does the application engineer answer questions? What are the top 5 questions they ask when they pick up the phone? It's back to that sort of basic business analogy. And then what are the tools that we can put in place to drive it? So, selection and configuration, like having something as simple as a cross-reference guide. You did have this old part, now this is the new part. That's a bigger data problem than it is a technology problem. The part is obsolete. We obsolete parts all the time. Big problem for Parker. Frustrating as hell for our customers because they'll type in a part that they bought 20 years ago and they just want the replacement. They want to keep that machine up and running. And we're like, yeah, we have a replacement, but if we can't tell them instantly, and they have to go to our channel partner and they have to find out, and then the channel partner has to say, oh, which is the replacement for you get the idea. But we were all doing that manually, and we're still doing that a lot manually. We installed a new cross-reference table for one of our divisions as an experiment, and their calls for that kind of stuff dropped 95% in a week. Because most of their calls were actually coming from our channel, saying, hey, customer's asking for this, what's the replacement? So again, going back to how do you build your technology and the tech stack and the Marcom's tech stack, for us it was more about what are the specific channel transaction problems and knowledge sharing problems we're trying to solve, and then the technology stack sort of falls into that a little bit simpler. It's not simple, I'm making it sound easier than it really is, but a lot of the selection process becomes easier once you sort of figure out, well, what business process am I trying to solve for? And then it also helps you sell it to management to close, get the funding to do the activity, if you can do a direct line of sight. Again, I realize I've been in both sides of these kind of conversations. You go, yeah, it sounds simple, but we also looked at it like we're also trying to make it more frictionless transactions. How do we make it just easier? It's funny, the airlines, right? The airlines are big into the Net Promoter Score and LTR and all that kind of stuff, and how likely you to recommend them. And but if you look at how many interactions you have with an airline now when you take a flight, I travel a lot on business, and I probably interact with an airline on any given flight about 20 or 30 times. because you do it through your phone, right? Getting instant statuses, I'm changing reservations, I'm doing whatever. That's now an expectation of mine. And it's fairly easy. If you go back 10 years ago, the lines at the customer service desks, unless they instantly cancel a flight now, the lines at the customer service desk, everyone's on their phone, and they've probably rebooked before they get to the top, right? Technology has made, not travel any easier, but at least it's made managing the transactions a lot easier, and being able to flip around. But that's the way we're looking at it. So, how do we help customers with product selection, and how do we help them with transactions? And if we look and say our online strategy, if we could hit those two out of the park, there's lots of other things we could do, but if we could hit those two out of the park, we will completely change the dynamic of engaging with our customers, and we'll align our business more with wanting to do this stuff. Like, as we started in a premise that our, marketing is just, it's all that fluffy stuff, and we make real things and we sell to real people, and we don't need all that marketing fluffy stuff. And there's some truth to that for a company like Parker, because we don't have the luxury of having millions of consumers who are going to buy one product. There's a lot of benefit to that, right? You can do more predictive analytics when you have that. Like, when you have volume and scale, and repeatability, that, because we've looked at some of the AI stuff, and I know we're going to hear a little bit more about that shortly. But for us, it's about decision making and predictive modeling, and it's actually hard for us because we've got so many variations. And there's not enough scale to justify sort of the building of the models. Like, we talk to folks like IBM and stuff like that, and they promise Watson is I think Watson's just a big marketing tool for IBM. But it's a fascinating model. But the challenge for us is that we can't feed it enough information to give us enough answers at enough scale to make it economically viable at the moment. Because it's all that knowledge in our heads, and how do we put the knowledge together, because there's too many variations for us at the moment. Again, and we're looking for the high frequency things. And there is a few. I mean, there's a few high frequency. So where we're looking at things like, how do we do predictive or self-service? Because we're big into trying to drive self-service. We're trying to look for our highest volume questions and answers. Again, back to this, what we found is the transaction flow becomes sort of key to working it forward. So I've got a couple more slides. And then just, I thought I'd throw in just a couple of examples of how we're doing things. Like, so we were sort of like, how do we reorganize our content? How do we make it more context, relevant? Because that's, it's the right information in the right context at the right time, right? That's sort of the key, and it's a way that we hadn't thought about it before. So we've done things like, and we're in the process of doing things like, well, we don't sell the truck, but we sell all the parts on it. And if I'm the truck driver, and I'm broken down and I need a part, and I go to Google, and I may not know the part number because I may not be able to see it, what can I type in? So we've actually created these visual selectors so you can actually click on them, and it will show you every part that Parker has on it, and then we'll link you right to a local distributor so you can buy it locally, right? But that takes us sort of deciding what's the high runners on the applications that we serve and things like that, and build these sort of visual catalogs in a very simplistic way without making them very elaborate. We've actually tied that, for example, into our standard e-commerce catalog. It's just a bunch of hyperlinks. It looks kind of sexy and cool, but that's, when you break it down, it's a bunch of hyperlinks with a sales catalog that links them to directly page, because the way commerce engines work now is every page has a unique page address. So you can do sort of cool things like that, and we can link them at a category level and stuff like that. The investment for us to turn one of these around, once we did the initial one, we can probably turn one of these around in a week, and it probably costs us about $5,000. But it's about the concept of taking a step back and saying, what are we actually trying to do and serve? So we have buses and boats and things like that. And again, it gives a tool to our divisions as well, because our role as our team's role is to sort of enable our divisions to do the marketing programs. So we always have to think, you think Parker, a big company, but we always have to design everything so that a $100 million company or a $50 million company can actually execute them. So we're big into templates, repeatability, and my old adage with agencies was, how many website designs do you think Parker needs? Because when I got there at first, we had 300 homepage designs. It's like, you sort of need one or two, because all the templates are the same, But it is about where we really need help is content modeling, getting it sort of organized in that respect, as opposed to just the technology piece. So this would be an example, and then just organizing your content, attributing for those of you who are selling any sort of technical product, the challenge is actually attribution and selection, because people select, you pick a laptop. Do you select it by screen density or screen size? If I'm an engineer, I'll select it by density because I'll be really into the specs and the attributes of that product, and there's probably 200 attributes I could possibly describe a laptop with. But in reality, as consumers, there's probably 5 that we actually use to buy it. It's finding those right 5 is hard. That's a content problem again. So the web has enabled us to do lots of cool stuff, but it's like, I was just talking earlier, just before the break, and I said, I think we've got a good strategy. We're just killing ourselves trying to execute it. Because we're just so far behind, and we're trying to, we're not sure whether our strategy is working or not yet, which means we're not sure whether it's the right one or the wrong one. But we're more focused on how do we keep executing, and even regardless of your size, we don't have enough resources to get it done. Parker spends $1 million, $5,000 at a time, as most of our partners know, which can be very frustrating, right? Because each of our divisions are empowered to make those decisions. So what we've tried to do is enable tools like this, and I think I may have another slide in here. No, I mean, that's the sort of example of the tools, but it comes back to sort of this new generation for us to deal with, and they just want information really quickly. And whether it's social or anything, so we talked about social communities and all of that. For us, a social community, our strategy, for example, is we're not really interested in customers talking to each other about our product. We want them to be able to listen to all of our engineers around the world. So we invested in social community technology with the express intent of allowing our folks to talk about the different technologies and applications and allowing our customers access. And let me go back to sort of, I'll end on this note and then I'll show you what our roadmap is. But the reason why we do that or think about it that way is that we look at our audience and we say a lot of our design engineer customers aren't really allowed share with each other, right? They're competing with each other or they're competing concepts. As much as they may like to, their respective companies won't let them. But they really need to get a thirst of information. So we looked and said, wow, we have like 500 engineers who know filtration. And because they're in 10 different divisions, they have different perspectives on it. Why don't we just let them chat on the filtration topic and allow our customers to view it and think about the community that way as, I think we even coined an internal name for it, like Parker Perspectives, and try build a community that way rather than trying to get customers to talk to each other or give references. We have a huge legal implication for people giving reviews and all that kind of stuff because it may be out of context, and if we're seen as endorsing it, lots of liability and stuff. But if you think about it as going back to another social stat, which is 98% of people actually just read, they don't actually contribute. We're like, yeah, they're the audience we want. We're not really interested in the people who want to talk. And again, more practical business logic for us in saying, okay, let's apply and invest that way. So we've literally created a community in some of our isolated areas, but it's really for knowledge sharing and giving our customers access to that kind of information. And then, our roadmap sort of, I think the next one sort of builds out a roadmap, right? So across our value streams, it's really moving from the sort of the classic lead generation to how do we get to predictive modeling? How do we move from sort of social community to sort of collaboration, across it? And it's really trying to build from awareness to accuracy. So again, just in the spirit of time, I could go on forever here, but it's kind of lots of cool stuff. But for us, we ground it back to what's the business need? Because if I can't justify the business need, it doesn't matter how cool the technology is or how cool the marketing campaign is. Like, we're in a world where we don't really care about marketing anyway. Like, I'm surrounded by engineers and brilliant people who are, very focused on, business development and very specific, and, they don't sell into a lot of fluff and stuff like that. So you got to be very pragmatic. But when you can show them the numbers and you can be pragmatic, they buy in 100%. So anyway, that's a little bit of our spiel. Hopefully that helped a little bit, give you some context. And as I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have either now or later. Okay. Thanks, guys.